Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Learning Shift live webinar series. And today we are going to discuss a very key concept, which is AI and teenagers and how we support them on this journey. So, the purpose of this webinar is to understand how AI is influencing education and how can we support our teenagers to make the best use of AI. And we'll also be identifying the skills that the teenagers require to ensure they are making ethical use of AI. And finally, be clear on how we as educators, parents, are clear on supporting them on this journey. And today I'm joined by two powerful voices in the field of AI and education. And I'm very pleased to welcome Claire and Chelsea from Switched On Academy and TomoClub. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation, Claire and Chelsea.
Thank you, Shreyas.
Thanks, Shreya.
So, we have decided what the topic is, and I've already given the introduction to the topic. So, why not start with our personal introductions and what we do? So, Claire, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I'm a teen success coach. I've been in the education space now for over 20 years and obviously have seen, how that landscape has changed to a degree, but also not that much to a degree, which I think is really the problem. It's the crux of this conversation to an extent because, young people are really struggling with understanding what they need to pass their exams, which I call the old skills, and then what they need to be future ready citizens and thrive, which are the new skills. So one of my main things that I love doing is to help prepare teenagers for the future and to help them feel confident, resilient, resourceful, to know that they matter, to know that their voice makes a difference. And this is why I do the coaching that I do.
Thank you so much. It's absolutely a pleasure to have you with us. And Chelsea,
Thanks, Shreyas. It's a pleasure to have Claire here with us as well. But I'm Chelsea Dean. I'm the curriculum director at TomoClub. I'm also a counseling psychologist, and I've been an educator in this field where I was mostly looking at how we need to build, say, future-ready skills. Earlier, we would talk to them about, um, say, soft skills like very, very core social emotional skills, right? And I think the way things have changed over the last, say, 5 years, I think we've seen a very drastic, very dramatic shift into what future-ready actually looks like, right? We've gone from looking at, say, STEM subjects to actually looking at, say, soft skills that matter on an everyday basis, and also looking at, say, the wider impact that every child or every teenager or even every individual in the workspace is having in their community. I think that's something that has shifted dramatically, and I'm so excited for this conversation because parents are facing the brunt of it as well, right? It's so difficult to answer all the questions because of these drastic changes. It's There's never a perfect answer, right? And I think what we aim to do today is actually give you some direction into it. Maybe not the perfect one, but at least for you to form your own opinions about it.
absolutely. And we will definitely explore some of these pressing questions and the most obvious answers to them. So, finally, I'm Shreyas. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Tomo Club and also an ICF certified life coach. So, I'm very pleased and honored to be sharing this panel with these two lovely women out there. And so let's get going. And we have our very first question, which is going to be about how do we translate AI into the real life applications? Because we have all seen parents, educators speak about the impact of AI. We know that AI is going to be a mainstream part of our lives. And as soon as 2030, I think it will be a dominant factor in the workforce as well. So, my first question to ask you, Chelsea, what are the most significant shifts that are happening with AI and the future of work with this current generation?
Very crucial question actually to begin with, because if we're looking at say significant shifts, we can already see that dramatic shift happening, right? And just to point out what those shifts are, we're looking at uh, not just teenagers but every individual exploring AI, right? But not really knowing what it does, while also knowing what it does, but then finding themselves in a space that is changing on an everyday basis, right? And I think you'll hear me saying this dramatic shift, this drastic change, I think throughout this webinar today, because that's exactly the kind of sentiment that I'm feeling around me, especially with the students that we have, right? So when we talk about the future of work, while the recent research, the Gallup research, they did a research in 2025, their surveys, and they've done one in 2026 where they've basically taken a survey around how around AI adoption overall for Gen Zs. And Gen Zs are not as hopeful as they were last year, right? And the reason can be varied. They did not really go in depth qualitatively, but quantitatively, definitely, curiosity was one that actually went lower than what it was in the previous year. Uh, we're seeing anger coming out as an emotion towards AI too. So now these are, say, emotions to actually start exploring. So when we're talking about these significant shifts happening with AI, we're seeing that the sentiments around it are also changing, right? And this is on an everyday basis because the workspace is changing. We know that newer jobs are being created, and as Shreyas already mentioned, by 2030, we're going to have a workspace or at least a workforce that is going to be AI driven too, right? And here, I think it's so crucial for even employers to see what sort of values they want to take back, and even for our students, even the current generation, to see what are the essential soft skills that, or at least essential skills that they need. So everyone needs to use AI. Can we say that? We don't know yet. But we can definitely say that there are these soft skills like analytical skills and logical thinking, critical thinking, being responsible citizens, and all of these crucial skills that are absolutely going to help in the workspace and in the workforce in the future. So that's, say, a cumulative of what we're looking at in terms of a shift.
Yeah, I completely hear you what you're speaking, Chelsea. It's very important for us to understand what the teens are undergoing currently. What do they feel like from day to day activities, and how do they progress? So there are too many questions that come up. And Claire, let me pull you onto this. So what are you really seeing with teams in your work as to what are their day-to-day activities look like around AI, and how are they coping up with this massive advancements that we are seeing in the field of AI?
Yeah, so I think the biggest change, obviously, regarding the education space in particular, is that it goes for the question that they're currently being tested on, literally right now in the UK at this time of year, is what can you memorize, right? They're all at home revising for GCSE, revising for A levels, revising for their end of years, for university, thinking, what can I memorize? Cram, cram, cram all this information into my head, regurgitate it onto the paper. Of course, that skill is going to be completely defunct, right? We don't need to memorize all this information. We just will have access to it at the click of a button in a matter of seconds. So the skill that's really changing that they need is not what can you memorize, it's can you think critically, can you communicate well, and can you adapt and solve problems? These are the skills which need to be focused on more in schools and education now moving forwards, so that then the teenagers have those skills that they need. Because without those, with AI, the output is only as good as the input. The quality of the answer is only as good as the question that you ask and the iterations that you make. So A very quick little story. For example, when my son was doing his history degree, he was given a 24-hour window to answer a question. He didn't have to try and remember all this historical knowledge. And so were all of his peers, of course. And they were allowed to use AI, they were allowed to use online resources, they were allowed to use libraries, books, whatever they wanted. They had 24 hours to answer the question. Now, I think this is a really, really good way of actually discerning that deeper contextual understanding of a subject. Because if everybody has access to everything, how do you make your answer better than somebody else's? So that's the kind of shift that we're seeing in education.
Yeah, I think that shift is very massive, and it makes total sense, right? If everybody is given the same resources, then the answer and the output will also be more or less the same. Because, as you rightly pointed out, what goes in comes out. So, garbage in is garbage out. So, that's a simple philosophy which seems very simple on the paper, but when you go behind and see what is happening with AI and the way it gets controlled or trained, I think that is where the real crux lies, which brings me to one excellent question in the chat. So Avinash, who's also our co-founder at TomoClub, he asks a very crucial question. Do you think adults need more coaching than teens? Uh, so I leave this question open to both of you.
Well, certainly from my experience, parents do ask me for coaching when I've been coaching their teens. I think it's important that as families, we all rise together, right? So we can't be coaching one aspect of the family without it impacting on the rest. And so if parents want to consciously parent and bring their teenagers up in a certain way, then yes, if they have coaching, if they have counseling, if they learn new things, if they get ahead of the program with AI, then they're going to have different conversations in the family home than if they don't. That's my belief anyway.
Chelsea.
I would completely agree with Claire. I think and very crucial question again, right? Because at the end of the day, when we're changing a system, or at least when we're impacting a system, all the subsystems need to work together at the end of the day, right? So, um, just say training the teenagers, or at least coaching the teenagers, the teens in one particular direction might not be very helpful if the entire system doesn't work together. So, definitely, the adults need as much coaching, I would say, or at least the same sort of resources so that they're able to enable the teens to actually get ahead too.
Absolutely. And I have a follow up from Avinash again. So, which I completely agree. Teenage period is very tough, and sometimes the conversations are not what we expect to have because it goes both ways. Sometimes we as adults are also not aware of these changes, and we also need some time acclimatizing to it. So, I think, Claire, this is right up your alley. So, how do you solve for this particular conversation, which can prove tough at times?
Yes, well, I've had a lot of experience teaching neurodiverse teens, teaching and coaching teens from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and doing trauma informed education training. And in one word, the one word that I can say to solve this is safety. If you don't create a safe environment, you won't get people, never mind teenagers, but you won't get people to open up. So you have to create safety and rapport very, very quickly, and to have that kind of those values really in an environment where it feels safe to make a mistake, it feels safe to ask a question, it feels safe to not know something, it feels safe to not answer something if you don't want to. So it's all about creating those right from the very start, even before you say the first sentence, really. Teenagers can sense that, right? They've got spidey senses. They know if an adult is saying one thing but actually energetically transmitting something else. They will pick up on that and then they will shut down. So it's about being transparent, being honest, and creating that environment of safety where it feels safe to open up and make mistakes, that's how you will get them talking.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I totally hear you on giving the teenagers the same respect because they are, in a way, more self aware and I would say, in a way, more close to the realities. And the same has happened in my coaching work as well because I feel if we, as adults, are able to address four things: the gremlins, the assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. I think that is where the first step towards setting a safe boundary and a safe structure starts, which we sometimes as adults tend to overlook because it might be fear of acknowledging something which you yourself do not know anything about, or it might also be from the conditioning that has happened over the years, which might be tough to break. So I think the having an honest conversation and respecting them for who they are is a good starting ground, which moves us to the next segment, which is called knowing versus doing. So, Chelsea, I would want to pick this up with you because we have had a lot of discussions on future ready skills. It goes by a lot of different names. It can be called SEL, it can be called human skills, it can be called executive function skills or 21st century skills. So, I would want to understand from you which set of future ready skills are actually becoming essential for the current times and also say a decade from now, and how are they being developed?
Again, very valid question there because when we're looking at future ready skills, one question that comes up often is how do you know the future? How do you know that these are the skills that are going to be, the ones that are going to get them prepped for the future? Do you already know what the future is going to entail for these kids? That's that's not exactly what we're trying to say here, right? So when we're talking about future ready skills by itself, we're saying these are skills that are going to be essential regardless of the changes that are going to happen around you, right? So when we're saying regardless of the changes, we're still pushing towards very, very core soft skills. So soft skills like communication. You still need to communicate with, say, your peers, with the people around you, even with AI. As Claire very rightfully said, the prompt that you put in is what's going to get the right result out. How do you communicate that? How do you create something that actually enables the right direction for yourself? So things like communication, collaborating with others, right? While that may not be one of the main priorities for uh, say HRs or for hiring managers, but definitely critical thinking, analytical thinking, logical thinking, all of these are very, very crucial future ready skills that even currently are being looked at and are being and the say employees are being assessed for all of these things, right? We need skills that enable these human interactions to keep going further. So when we talk about how are they being developed or how we can keep developing this, is the number one, look at whether we're looking at cognitive offloading with AI or are we looking at cognitive surrender, right? So when we're talking about, say, cognitive offloading, we're saying, okay, just like how we use, say, the calculator for our basic arithmetic, that's cognitive offloading, right? And we've got a bunch of research that has already come in which talks about cognitive decline in the age of AI because of this cognitive offloading. So we don't want to do the thinking, or at least we're stopping with the thinking, getting the output. But when we talk about cognitive surrender, we don't want to start with the thinking either, right? So we're like, give me a draft. I'll think about it after you give me the first few pointers, and then let's go ahead and maybe think about it. So that's what's cognitive surrender. So I think that's where the difference lies. So also being very cognizant about which direction you want to take, and that's where critical thinking becomes very, very crucial, whether it is with AI or whether it is with any of the tools that you actually be using, whether currently or whether in the workspace. And I think this is also very crucial for parents to understand that just because, or at least if a student is using, or if your child is using AI for, say, their math homework, or they're using AI for any particular skill training that they're trying to do. I'm talking about very tangible ones. um, I think it's very important to see whether the thinking is being either assessed or at least being built, right? I think it's a process that is very important. So that's where the knowing versus doing space comes in. So that's number one. But I think one thing to definitely look at and be more critical about is if they are using AI for companionship or for spaces that maybe would be better with, say, human interaction, right? And here I say maybe because, again, there is being research done in this space as well, where, uh, say, an AI companion can provide a space that is non-judgmental, right? Or at least that's what the results speak for themselves, right? Like the results speak about how it listens to you, basically. It's the entire Eliza effect all over again. So yeah, but I'm sorry for making this very long, but it is absolutely essential, and I think maybe Claire can build onto what I was just talking about, and you know, actually tell what are the things that parents are actually talking about with these future learning skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard a few topics that you brought on, which is cognitive ability, human interaction, continuing to be this sentient beings that we are, which sometimes feels so very complex because of all the different things that are happening in our lives. So I just want to come to you, Claire. So is this necessity of being future ready, or is this necessity of being trained in AI tools adding to the pressure young people already are feeling currently?
Um, I think it depends because it depends how it's framed, right? If AI is considered adding pressure, then it has a slightly negative connotation, and it might be that young people are thinking, oh, I don't need any more pressure. I'm not going to interact with it. But if it's about working smarter, not harder, and actually taking away pressure and giving young people an opportunity to then have more space in order to perhaps be more creative or to follow their passions or to do the things that they want to do, then we can reframe it, and then it might be like, actually, this would be great for me to use some AI. If I can plan my university dissertation in 15 minutes instead of 3 hours at the library, that gives me 2 hours to go and maybe go for a run or prepare a healthy meal rather than rushing and being overwhelmed and unhealthy. So I think it's about having that balance, understanding that if we free up some time, it's not necessarily to do more pressurized work. Like, let's use that free time to really enhance our lives, our well-being, so that we have balance.
Absolutely. I think it is very imperative for us to know the right balance and when to use a particular tool and when not to use. So we are getting a lot of good questions in the chat as well. So to the audience who are joining us now, please do share where you're joining us from, and if you have any questions, please do drop them in the chat. We are going to pick up as many questions as possible. And we have Knowledge Hub 0108 asking, how do we ensure teens don't lose problem solving skills while using AI tools daily?
Yeah, I think, Chelsea, we had a quick conversation about this, didn't we? And about, are we losing our grey matter because we're not using that muscle to do the problem solving for ourselves? We're just quickly going straight to an AI tool to solve it for us. And I think that this working smarter, not harder, is a really important thing. So if I can just give a quick example of how I've supported teams to use problem solving and AI together. So, for example, with revision, right? I suggested to one of my students that they upload screenshots of their revision notes into ChatGPT and ask for a summary. And then also ask ChatGPT. So not just be happy with that, but ask ChatGPT, okay, what have I missed out? What should I have included? What could I have added more about that's going to come up in the exam? So it's about taking it to that next level of questioning, right? It's not just accepting the first response. The iteration is the key. That's what will make people stand out and above and get on faster, right? So iterating that answer and saying, and then saying, okay, now can you turn these into a revision resource for me that works best for me, right? So not just a quiz chart or flip chart or something, but what works for you? Is it a visual mind map or whatever it is? So you're then using the resource and you're using your creativity, you're using your problem solving skills, and you're saving time while you're still learning. So that's an example of how I would tackle that. But I'm curious to hear from you, Chelsea, about making sure that we keep our brains working well.
Absolutely love this because I think that's exactly what we were talking about. I, and you mentioned this at the beginning too, Claire, where you were talking about how uh, instead of cramming information, how do you present your learning also, right? And I think one of the biggest, I would say, misconceptions around this is that we don't need to learn or we don't need to memorize things, right? While research actually puts us in that direction and pushes us in the direction that memorization is also important. Because how else are you going to build your gray matter, right? Um, it needs that hard it needs that hard labor, whether it is solving a puzzle, whether it's say just a crossword for that matter. You need to use say your neural networks to actually get something going, whether it's something that you do with your hands, whether it's more hands-on, whether it's something that you're building from scratch. It needs to show the process, and I think that's what I believe in. Whether we talk about our assessments or whether we talk about just problem solving in general, if you're able to show the process of whether what you've learned or what you're doing or how you're presenting yourself or even in say solving a problem, if the process is clear, your brain's going to keep working,
Mm.
right? That cognitive surrender is not happening immediately, right? At least you're putting your brain, or at least your brain power to use. Use your frontal lobe the way it needs to be used.
Yeah, I think you both have summed it up so well, and which brings back to the very basic conversation that I have been having with a lot of different educators, which is to retain that particular friction in learning. Because when we remove the friction out, I think that is when we start losing our problem solving skills, our cognitive ability. So in a way, I think it is really important to have friction in learning. Let our teams get frustrated with any topic that they take before jumping in with a response or with the help. So I think that is some way where we can ensure AI as well as the traditional learning can coexist. Otherwise, as Claire said, it's just going to become a complex bunch of stuff where everybody just starts putting out whatever they know, and then the ultimate result is going to be another garbage. So I think there are more questions coming up in the chat, which are quite interesting. So in C. Ramashri, so she asks, "Do you think your team understands AI better than you do?" How would we answer this, right? Is there a perfect answer to this question, Claire?
No, of course there isn't. And but what I would say is that it's not so much about understanding AI. Just because teenagers have, perhaps been brought up in more of a digital world, it doesn't mean that those questioning skills and those critical thinking skills and the discernment is necessarily better than those of an adult, right? Just because they're more used to digital platforms. So and I think it's those skills that make you understand AI well, regardless of how old you are. It's about asking those questions and being discerning with the responses, understanding that AI can make mistakes, realizing that you have to double check facts and that you have to cross-check research, and perhaps teenagers don't understand it better because they want an immediate response, instant gratification, get the work done, go outside and do something else that they enjoy, right? So they're just like, oh, I'll take the first answer and that'll do, right? And that's not how we need to use AI. So that would be my response to that, but I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
I mean, I think given the circumstance that we are, we can only have experimentation and keep iterating, as you rightly mentioned. So, which brings us to our next segment, which is about the emotional impact. So, Chelsea, let me start with you. So, where is the biggest gap between what young people need and what they are currently experiencing?
I think let's talk about, say, different segments when we're talking about this, right? Whether let's talk about education or research space separately, and say in their personal lives separately. Um, when we talk about, say, their schooling or their education per se, one of the biggest gaps that we're still trying to bridge within the education system is the way we assess our students. And I think this is something that Claire mentioned just in the previous question, that the way I think the way we are asking these questions has become a problem. I mean, things have changed drastically. Uh, whether we talk about, say, even the topics that we're talking about in the classroom, whether we're talking about, say, just overall, just a feeling towards their peers, what do they need to do, what is their emotion towards, say, a particular subject. It does schooling mean getting an end result or a report card at the end, right? Or a report that is helpful for, say, graduation. I think that's the kind of direction that we need to actually kind of take as adults who are in this space. I think that's where I would want to start off with, because that's where the biggest gap lies within the education system. Is to actually talk about what or where the impact lies, right? So what are we evaluating for at the end of the day, right? And if we're evaluating for learning, are we evaluating for, say, memorization anymore? Are we evaluating for process thinking, right? Or are we looking at, say, their creativity? Are we, looking at how resilient they become in this space? Are they able to adapt in different situations? So what is our goal? I think that is, and again, there's no one size fit all or fit for all, right? Like there's nothing like that can help every child or every individual out there. But when we come to, say, the personal or the more, I would say, familial peer surrounded space, I think there's also a question here. There is a sort of dependency on, there is becoming a dependency, I would say, with AI becoming a very patient listener, right? It's not going to respond till you click enter, right? And because it's built on this model of actually giving you something that resonates with you, because it's building on these neural networks at the end of the day, right? Is building on the patterns that you're creating with the words that you're sharing. And I think that is the kind of direction that requires a lot of discernment. So how are we bringing about that discernment for our students? So that's where the gap lies, I believe. So if we're talking about companionship, what to, like, where is the gap then? I think that's a bigger question then. Where is the gap in, say, their surrounding, because of which they need to maybe either rely or take the support of, say, AI or AI tools for that matter.
Absolutely. I think I can pinpoint two things which you said that makes the most sense. One is awareness, and the second is active listening. I think these two skills will help us solve at least 60% of our confusion or the problems that we are facing with AI, which brings me to this question, Claire. So, what should a parent or an educator focus on right now without feeling overwhelmed that they have to always listen or they have to always be present in the room to understand what their teenagers want.
Well, that is what they need to focus on. They need to be present. That's exactly what they need to be. Because if we're only listening to our young people with half an ear and half an eye and our mind on something else, then we're not really being fully present and showing up for them and giving them that space to tell us what they need. So I'm not sure that I understand your question.
So, what I'm trying to get at is parents, they themselves are also going through a lot of different things. Some are fighting unemployment. There are too many different things that are happening in this world. So, how would they be able to, be better present, be better aware, and be in a space where they can listen without feeling overwhelmed? So, I would just want to understand from the parent or the educator perspective, how can they do this without that feeling of guilt or overwhelm?
Yeah, so for me, that's about self-regulation. That's about understanding how to regulate yourself so that you can show up truly and consistently for young people. And if we're not emotionally regulating ourselves as adults, we can't do that. And this is a big problem in schools. And this isn't a dig at teachers, but so many teachers are emotionally dysregulated because they're carrying such a heavy load of trying to navigate and manage all these different constraints on their time and these different things that they have to do, that it's very hard then to show up when you're emotionally dysregulated. So it's about really being mindful and taking time. And this doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of time, money, and effort doing this. You can literally choose to do some box breathing right now in 3 seconds to emotionally regulate yourself before you have a conversation with your teenager. Right? You can choose to walk away from an argument and then come back later on to have a conversation when everybody's calmed down. Right? You can choose to go for a walk before you get back from work so that you are letting all the stresses and strains from the day disappear so you can show up fresher for your family. So it's about choosing emotional regulation and modeling that to our young people. That's what I do, and that's what I believe works.
I'm completely in agreement with you because whatever methods that you suggested brings down the multitude of problems into one singular thing and making that laser focus into solving one after the other will build momentum and ultimately leaves the clarity before it becomes very complex. So I think these are very valid practical steps. So shall we take a few more questions before we offer the free resource?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just love to ask as well. I'd just love to add that I think for parents, for them to focus on once we've all calmed down and put our stuff to one side, it's about having a better conversation with young people. Like they're actually craving this connection. And if you ask them things, they do know the answers. So if you say to them, well, actually, what are you curious about? What do you enjoy creating? Or what problem would you love to solve? This can open up a lovely conversation, a lovely dialogue where it's a willingness to explore rather than judgment or you've got to go down this path or we need to finish this by today, right? And I think that that is a way that parents and educators can connect with young people in a way that's preparing them for an AI world and is connecting with them at in a way that works for them, meeting them where they're at. I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is where the clarity part comes into effect as well, because it just compounds into building momentum, building this effective conversations, and it becomes an iteration. So I think it's best to start with clarity, because lack of clarity means your momentum is also lost. So
Yes.
thank you so much for giving these practical tips. So would we be open to taking a couple of questions and then go to the free resource?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think I have one question here from Popo 11871. How can teenagers build confidence in a world where AI seems smarter every day?
Ooh, I'll have to take this question for sure. Again, very crucial because at the end of the day, what does confidence mean for students now? Right? Is it the confidence in themselves to be out there presenting themselves, or is it just that confidence that okay, I understand everything that's happening around me? So I believe that confidence needs to stem from their self belief, right? And how do you build that? That comes from conversations. It comes from, say, a community, right? So it's not just um, say a lot of inner work that definitely goes on that you can enable your child to go forward with, right? So a lot of work like journaling and all of these things can actually help with confidence building, getting into programs. And I read this, I'm not so aware, but I think this was a LinkedIn post. But every this and it stuck with me that every no, every sorry, you've lost every competition that you've not participated in, right? So I think that's so crucial because at the end of the day, how do you build that confidence if you've not given yourself that stage to get ahead? Because AI might seem smarter and it is, going to give you that direction, but at the end of the day, it's all sort of sounding the same, right? What is unique about you? What is your essence, right? Uh, what is your lingo? So what gets you going? I think everyone is so unique in their own way. So having that sort of like all the, if you look, go back and look at the castle framework, if you have those in place, there's nothing that can break your confidence. If you're self-aware, you can manage yourself. You're emotionally aware, right? You're socially aware. And when we talk about social awareness, we're talking about okay, you can sense something's happening around you, right? People feel comfortable around you. That's where your confidence should lie. That's what I believe in.
Anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because, and I love the word AI seems smarter every day. So, AI is only as good as the people who are putting in the information, right? Um, Now, for teenagers building confidence, I often say to young people, well, have you lost confidence? And they say, oh, yes, I've lost. And well, where's it gone? Because you can go, where do you find it? Because you can pick it up and then one day you can be confident again. And I think the only way we confident is by doing hard things, by momentum, by taking action when we're not feeling confident. That's what builds the confidence. For example, this is my first LinkedIn Live, right? Did I feel confident before I started the conversation? Not really. I was managing the tech and will I get in and have I clicked the right link? Now, do I feel confident? Yes, I do. Would I be happy to do another LinkedIn Live? Yes, I would. It's been a great experience. So you only become confident by taking the action. And AI is not taking the action unless we give it the instruction. So we're more confident than AI.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. Which is why our professor, one of my professor, he used to tell me, garbage in is garbage out. So you can't blame the tool when it is you who is instructing it to do something. So you will have to be more confident and better prepared for the tool to work for you and not against you. So I think that's a valid advice. So one other interesting question from all things classroom: which skill is hardest to teach? Is it critical thinking, communication, creativity, or collaboration?
My answer to that would be creativity. I think creativity is perhaps the most innate skill. Either you're a creative person or you're not. Either you can think creatively or you can't, but I do think collaboration can be taught, can be practiced. Communication can definitely be enhanced and improved. And critical thinking can also be modeled and practiced. But creativity, I'm thinking my son, one of my sons, he's an artist, he's a sculptor, right? Where does that creativity come from? That's an expression of his soul. That's not something that he can be taught. It's something that could be honed. He can use certain techniques and everything else to improve his creativity, but that creativity comes from within. So I'm not sure that creativity can really be taught, but it can definitely be honed and enhanced in a world of AI to make the difference.
Absolutely. I think it would have been so much better if creativity could have also been taught, just like any other skills. And probably world would have been a better place or not. We can only assume the best case scenario. So one final question from my pastel art. Do you think emotional intelligence is more valuable today than it was 10 years ago?
I can take this actually. I would say it's always been valuable, right? It's I think it's just that it's right there for you now, for you to actually know that you're. And I think this in itself builds confidence, right? If you're emotionally intelligent or to deal with the things in your life or with the circumstances in your life, I believe that in itself is pushing you in that space of adaptability. So it's always been valuable. The circumstances around us have constantly changed, right? So say for a generation before ours or a generation uh, even previous before former to that, or I think the kind of circumstances that they've had, we don't know if emotional intelligence was a thing that actually could have gotten them out of, say, tougher situations, right? But right now, if we're able to create, say, safer spaces where one person, it just doesn't take one person to be emotionally intelligent in a conversation or in, say, a community. It takes a community to be emotionally intelligent to go towards a very say directed citizenship, right? Or very just global citizenship. I think these are the core values that we value more now, but it's always been valuable, is what I would say.
It absolutely makes so much sense for us to understand how the intelligence is also making progress because sentience is the base of everything else. So I think it will always stay important till the time we are sentient. So only evolution might be the factor that can change it. Um, so I would just want to answer this question, perhaps Claire, because this is something which is relevant to so many schools in every country that we have spoken to. So how can schools manage team issues when they have a tough school schedule to keep up with?
I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand, right, to be able to make this happen. I think there isn't enough space. There isn't enough space in the day. There isn't enough downtime in all of our lives. We're just running so busily. We don't have time to develop that emotional intelligence. We don't have the space that's needed to just sit quietly and ponder on a problem, right? It's all go, go, go. And the teachers don't have the capacity, the kids don't have the capacity, the management doesn't have the capacity. There is no space, there is no cushion, right? In my personal diary, I'm very mindful to actually block out sections of my day in order for me to recalibrate, right? And unfortunately, in the school day, the curriculum is so full of stuff that perhaps potentially we don't need people to learn, that there's no cushion, there's no space to absorb the drama, to absorb life coming at you from all angles. If you don't have that space in your diary, you can't create that space in your mind, and then you can't create the resilience, and you can't get the downloads of how to solve the problem. right? Because you're too busy running around on this hamster wheel, going to the next thing, going to the next thing, going to the next thing, not emotionally regulating yourself. That it leads to burnout, overwhelm, then complete, procrastination potentially, because it's just like so much going on, I can't deal with any of it. And so I don't know how schools can create more space uh, in the calendar, but that is what's needed. And I don't mean people going, oh, well, they got 6 weeks school holiday, they've got half term, they got this. No, it needs to be space on a daily basis, a little bit of not just free time, but it's just, yeah, I've seen these things in Amsterdam on Friday evenings. They encourage people to go to unwind in spaces where there's no technology at all, no phones, no computers, no nothing, right? And people literally can just sit and take a nap next to a complete stranger, right? Or they can chat, or they can read books, or they can play games, chess or board games, card games. And it's all about that decompression. You can literally sense it by looking at the image that, oh, suddenly everybody's just relaxing, just decompressing. And this is, I feel, what is needed, not just for teenagers, but actually for all of us.
Absolutely. I think I might sound very far-fetched with this suggestion, and it might take time. But would it be safe to say, if the schools were to change their result-driven outcomes to something more purpose-driven and something which values the innate talent and make the outcomes based on this, would that ensure, if not a complete 100% eradication of these issues, maybe they can just step up their game to say 20 to 30% and ensure that the students or the teams are supported with additional resources when they require it, and just be staying present in that particular situation and helping them navigate those challenges. Would that work? Is that something possible for schools to implement?
Yes, there are some schools in Spain called, what are they called? Not democratic schools. And these are where students get to choose the subjects that they want to learn based on their strengths. And so, of course, they don't necessarily have a full jam-packed curriculum because they're not necessarily learning 12 subjects, right? They're learning 2 or 3 subjects, or maybe more if they want to. And I think it's quite an interesting concept, this democratic school of you choosing what your strengths are, where your interests lie, and then you're learning for the sake of learning. You're not learning because you're told you have to learn, which is very different, right? We're getting into Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, right? Um, so then you've got more time to free up to pursue other things, creative pursuits, artistic pursuits, mindful pursuits, doing nothing, right? And that would definitely change the way people come out of education. Whether it's the right thing to do or not, I don't know. But it's an interesting concept that there are some schools who are already doing this.
Absolutely. And I agree with the innovative projects. This has been such an insightful conversation. I think for the audience who have stuck with us for the entire 50 or so minutes, I think this is the time you've been waiting for, where we promised to give you 2 additional bonuses for free. So here they are. Claire, if you could start by just giving our audience what the resource is about and what.
Yes, of course. So I created a guide. It's for the future ready teen. It's a guide for parents because so many parents are trying to work out how to prepare their teenagers for this rapidly changing world. And I wanted it to be very practical, reassuring, and focused on the human skills that are going to matter most that we've mentioned today, like critical thinking and curiosity and focus and communication and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, you can download the guide. It's completely for free. And if the QR code doesn't work, it's at teens.switchonglobal.com/future-ready. So I would love for parents and educators to check that out if they think it's helpful.
Absolutely. And we will definitely add the links to the resources in the comments as well. So please do check out our channels and you will be able to access it. Chelsea, what have we got for our audience today?
Sure, this is a very basic and something that is going to create that curiosity for teenagers. It's an AI Foundations questionnaire where you would rate yourself very simple 15, say 15 questions for 4 parts, so or 4 competencies that we're looking at around knowledge and awareness, feelings and environment, responsibility and future readiness, and just reflection and curiosity all around AI, right? And you would uh, basically come up with where you lie on a scale, right? Whether you're an AI newcomer, are you AI curious, are you an AI learner, or are you right there about being an AI explorer? And what are some areas that you would need uh, to maybe build on? I think that's what is the most crucial part. How do you reflect on where you lie so that you're able to get to the AI explorer stage as well?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I just request our audience to please go through these guides. And if required, you can always contact Claire and Chelsea. I've linked their profiles on the post. So you will be able to access them. Please do DM and get to know more. Claire, Chelsea, it's been a delight. And I have had the best seat in the entire audience. So I've had the first person view, and it feels so much more better that we are talking about this, and also helping our parents, educators, and school leaders and the teens who are going to be the next champions of the future. I think this conversation will give them at least that first baby step that they can take towards ensuring they are better prepared for AI dominated world and stay resilient. So, any closing thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I'm off with that. I think it's an absolute pleasure speaking with Claire today on this very important topic, actually. And hope we continue this discussion over more about this series. But there's definitely a learning shift that is happening, and it is the right time to talk about it, whether with the parents or the companies, I think, and with our educators too. Right? So this is the right time for sure. But thanks for giving me this opportunity to come on this call too.
Absolutely. Claire?
Yes, thank you, Shreyas. It's been lovely having this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope it will go on to help, so many people, because this is a confusing time. And I think the key thing really is to understand that, you're not alone in this. Please do reach out for help, because sometimes a few focused conversations can really help a young person to think more clearly about their strengths, their interests, those future pathways, and how to integrate technology in a thoughtful way. And, we don't have to all figure this out on our own, right? There is support out there, there are communities out there. So I think that that's the main thing. We're all going through this together. And that's why it was so brilliant to have this conversation. And bring this out in the open. I think it's important. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this conversation. We will be back with more Learning Shift live series, and hopefully, if the interest is there, we will bring Claire once again for a more detailed conversation. Until next time, please take care and stay safe. So, this is Shreyas signing off from TomoClub.